Welcome everyone, thank you for coming on by, and in November of 1989, episode 28 of Dragon Ball Z aired, showing the death of the mighty Piccolo. Well, you technically saw a portion of it at the end of episode 27, but we'll ignore that. However, you also had a reanimated take on this big moment within a cutscene for Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi. So I thought, why not go side by side and compare the two, looking at what was great and what could have perhaps been done better. There's also some big names from Z like Tadayoshi Yamamuro and some lesser known but skillful ones like Hisashi Eguchi. Of course though, like in every video, the featured artist is Alawati4. I recommend checking out his work. He also does some short little animations that are quite cool. Link to his account is in the description. I'm sure he would appreciate the support and use the following instructions on screen to feature in a video. Now with episode 28, you have the much loved Studio Junyo with Minoru Okazaki as the animation supervisor, and with Hisashi Eguchi animating this particular cut. Even though Eguchi, among fans at least, is probably one of the lesser known names from the studio, often overshadowed by Masaki Sato and Maeda himself, he was one of the best animators within the studio at the time, next to Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru. His style on Dragon Ball featured a lot of bold line work and intense hatching. It provides characters with quite a gritty aesthetic, which is still one of my favorite looks in this franchise. And all of those elements are displayed here to the fullest extent. The director and storyboarder for this episode, we have another Minoru Okazaki, who actually was the director for the very first episode of Dragon Ball. His work on the franchise is a mix. He can provide some rather creative and impactful framing throughout an episode. 122 or episode 1 are fine examples, although other times it's just sort of okay and nothing really noteworthy. This episode though, he certainly produces something incredibly memorable and definitely I would say among his best work on Z. But of course, to the scene itself. After the recap, the episode begins straight away with Nappa drawing back his attack. The flat black background really goes well in illuminating the aura, with the aura having a spark-like shape. Nappa then snaps to the big release, with speed lines dominating the cut. Everything is also converted into black and white for a brief instant, really drawing emphasis on this moment. Although minor nitpick on the animation side is that the cut begins with the character somewhat midway through the action. There's no establishing shot before he winds up, kind of reducing a bit of the build up. You can see what I mean in the prior Studio Live episode with Takanori Kudo's take on the scene. It's nothing major and the actual release by Eguchi is better animated, and well, pretty much the entire scene in general. The shot switches to Gohan with a nice shocked expression, being also whited partly out with highlights. The background switches between a blue and red variant. Very simple, but adds a bit more of a dramatic flair, instead of just having one background, and these are two colors you will consistently see throughout this scene. You then get a set of speed lines all drawn in an equal length, which funnel your attention straight to Nappa. The way the background is painted with the light bursting out from the center, as well as the high contrast between light and dark values, succeeds in this also. The next shot begins on Nappa, then switches to Gohan. The scale of Gohan and the amount of negative space surrounding him gives such a helpless feel. It's a great way to build off the original panel. Moving on, there is another shocked expression. Eguchi's artwork pretty much feels like a mirror image of Toriyama's own. The following frames also go much in the same trend. I also find it quite interesting with how much speed is communicated with Piccolo, despite there being barely any actual animation. It's just a loop of 3 frames with the same key pose on ones, which means a new drawing for every frame. It's quite conservative, but you get a great sense of speed and energy. Okazaki then builds upon even more of that weak and helpless feel, rising the tension with the camera directly behind Gohan with another long shot. The placement of him right in the center of the frame, the scale of the circular effects surrounding him, red effects piercing the black and white visuals all tie in selling the feeling of impending doom. There are then a set of speed lines representing Piccolo as he dashes in. Both characters are even shaded out in more black. Piccolo is then struck with those circular effects surrounding both characters now, and those little bits of red effects still breaking through. The framing of Piccolo in front of Gohan is quite dramatic. The stretched out arms, all these straight and oval shaped effects bursting forth. The hatching is even more intense with these speckles of white breaking through. There is also a great addition that wasn't in the manga to have a tight close-up of Piccolo. Eguchi displays a strong sense of resistance through his animation. His drawings are also excellent. The facial expressions, big bits of clothing ripping off, speed lines everywhere, and the rough nature to the lines sells the pain he is going through and that this attack is really tearing into him. The following shot fades out in slow motion, transitioning into white, allowing the viewer to soak in what's just happened. It's actually surprising that the artwork feels even more rougher in style than the manga, which is something you don't typically see, and I'm completely for. The scene switches back to color with some cool explosions, not really anything too significant to point out in the following cuts that I haven't already mentioned. You've got great artwork, and the storyboard doesn't really stray from the manga, quality work. Now, in summary, great directional output by Okazaki. The whole idea of switching to black and white creates a unique atmosphere and clearly communicates to the viewer that something not just big but quite significant is about to take place. Eguchi executed the storyboard superbly. It was an excellent choice to have him animate this scene, and he seems to go mostly uncorrected by Maeda. Now, just a little detail and not criticism at all is that with the Nappa scene, I noticed that Eguchi left out the battle damage from Piccolo's Ki Blast attack prior. You see it in the original panel and in Kudo's take on the scene, but it's of course absent here. So I wonder if he just simply forgot it. I mean, Toriyama sort of does as well in one panel or two. It's an easy thing to do. But now to the newer take on the scene. So the character designer and the animation supervisor is the legendary Tadayoshi Yamamuro. His approach to supervision is quite invasive compared to Maeda, although on Z his corrections were typically great, though perhaps unnecessary at times, and here they are no different, being quite dominant, so it's difficult to tell who the key animator actually was. You also have another legendary figure though providing the storyboard, being Yoshihiro Ueda. He worked on the original Dragon Ball series as a director and storyboarder from episode 7 all the way through to GT. He is known for his use of reflections and a wide variety of colors in his scenes. Purple was quite a common one. Unfortunately though, Ueda, as I mentioned, only does the storyboard, with Yasunori Goto directing. Now, starting off, the storyboard and direction are almost identical to the start of the original scene. The shot size is the same, Nappa's attack begins from the same starting position, and even the aura is the same color. But the foreshortening is certainly improved, providing a somewhat more dynamic look. However, the gesture isn't really as strong compared to the original scene, and especially to the manga, which is even more pushed. Although in the original, the arm would be broken if it was to achieve this pose. So technically speaking, this particular animator's take is more anatomically correct, so I can't fault him for making that choice. Of course, breaking the joints in animation has been commonplace for decades to achieve greater flexibility, so it is likewise a completely valid approach in Eguchi's case. Moving on though, Gohan's expression is good and well drawn. Animation wise, it's very much the same quality. The composition in this next shot is again very much identical to the storyboard, although instead of black speed lines, it's white ones. Personally, they don't feel as effective. However, in the next shot, the black ones do make a return, which is great. The composition is equally good, as the dust clouds flying up act as a channel drawing your eye straight to Gohan and makes it all feel a bit more dramatic. The next shot is pretty much spot on to the original panel as well. With Piccolo's run, it's done in the same way, holding the key pose with not really any animation, with exception to the antennas moving, although it feels a little stiff partly because of how the body moves. In relation to the hand, in the original the hand moved in a separate motion to the body, whereas here the body and hand move in the same motion, and this is because it's pretty much just one drawing moving up and down, again with exception to the antennas, whereas before it was the same pose but 3 of the loop frames were redrawn with some slight differences in the clothing, making it not feel as static. Furthermore, it doesn't communicate the same level of speed due to the timing, but in isolation the speed is fine. However, there's a slight change cutting out the reactions and going straight to Piccolo dashing in front. The framing once again takes more cues from Okazaki's board. As Piccolo is hit, the artwork is quite expressive. The way the clothing is animated has a very flowy look as well, and you have some white circular effects and red ones returning. To the next one, mirror images again in terms of composition, with the pose looking a little stronger. As the attack hits Piccolo, there is more superb expressions. I love how the animator kept the detail of all the clothing ripping off, and in quite big chunks too. The way the expression is animated though doesn't communicate as much of that feeling of resistance like Eguchi's did. Still, it's quite solid. Then there's some more glorious clothing sakuga with a slow motion finish and some really nice explosions. I do like the shapes here, quite a loose and flowy look. Now in conclusion, I would say quite a solid output. Ueda's board, despite not doing anything new, was a cool tribute nonetheless to the original and was well animated. The directional output, while good, was nowhere near as dramatic as Okazaki's. The whole shift to black and white, like I said before, creates such a noticeable change in the atmosphere. Even in episode 27's brief take, it was directed fine but didn't feel as important. Furthermore, Eguchi's art style and artwork was very rough, angular and gritty, giving an extra layer of expressivity that just took everything up a notch again. Like I mentioned before, the characters are quite well drawn throughout the remake, but Yamamuro's designs and supervision doesn't lend itself to nearly as much expressivity, especially in this era. Overall, when it comes to comparisons, people can sometimes boil it down to one being bad and the other good. The truth is that both are good here, but the original gave something that was truly exceptional. So thank you all for watching the video. Someone actually gave me the idea in the comments of the Goku SSJ transformation breakdown video about doing a comparison to the reanimated cutscenes in Ultimate Tenkaichi. So thank you to whoever that was. And at the time I thought of doing a comparison between the scene of Elder Kai unlocking Gohan's potential, but around that time things started getting a bit busy again and I didn't have as much time to make content, which is why the videos right after that one were much shorter, and so I put that idea on hold and eventually forgot until last week. Of course, this video did not cover that comparison, as I concluded that it wasn't as interesting as I initially thought it was. So yeah, random behind the scenes stuff for anyone that cares, but I mean, you've watched to the end of the video, so of course you do, I think. But with that, as always, I'll see you later.